Mindi Kassotis was a man of the law, a Navy JAG prosecutor who spent his days putting criminals behind bars. On his wedding day, he looked like the ultimate success story. But while the world saw a protector, Nicholas was already calculating a crime that even his legal training couldn't hide.
She loved you and trusted you to tell her the truth, to protect her, to live out your marriage vows. And yet you were the one that she needed protection from.
The driver of that SUV is Mindi Kassotis. In the trunk of his SUV is the body of his wife, 40 years old Mindi Kassotis, a woman he had been married to for 6 years. He plans on disposing of her body in a local swamp. He had spent months carefully deleting her. In his theory, she died in the hospital and was mistakenly cremated. Therefore, nobody reported her missing.
Police are asking for help identifying a woman's body who was found in Riceboro in early December.
A few days later, when local hunters found her remains, she was unrecognizable, as it was meant to be. A face without a name, left in the black water of a Georgia swamp, where the world was never supposed to look. Erased from existence for a long time. To the state of Georgia, she was Jane Doe. Nicholas thought he had achieved the impossible, a victim who wouldn't be missed. Because Mindi hadn't been reported missing, there was no search party, no flyers on lampposts, no one was coming for her. He had successfully silenced her world. But what Nicholas didn't account for was a relentless forensic machine that doesn't need a missing persons report to start hunting. It began with an identical sketch that refused to let her stay anonymous and ended with a DNA profile that reached through 500 miles of silence to pull him out of his new life. On paper, Mindi had hit the jackpot. Nicholas was a judge advocate general in the Navy. He was deployed to Iraq, had traveled the world, and worked in reputable government institutions, including the Pentagon. After leaving active service, he became a practicing lawyer. He was charming, charismatic, and radiated a confidence that felt like a shield. But Mindi wasn't looking for a savior. She was a powerhouse in her own right.
She was always in honors classes in high school and college and all that.
Described by friends and family as bright, smart, selfless, Mindi held a master's degree in public service. She was a legal secretary in Washington, D.C., a writer, a podcaster.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Compelling Women podcast. I'm Mindi, your host, and I'm really excited to share with you another thought-provoking interview with a different compelling woman.
A woman dedicated to helping others. She had a voice and a community that listened. But Nicholas didn't want a partner, he wanted a subject. And to get it, he created a ghost, a character named Jim McIntyre, an FBI agent supposedly dispatched to protect him from enemies he claimed were a byproduct of his classified Navy service. They were supposedly after Mindi as well. And that made her so terrified that she became enslaved to the only person who could protect her, her husband.
I remember her saying, I may have had a tail.
Someone following her.
Yeah. It ramped up after that.
She was truly fearful for her life.
For the next few years, he moved her through over 50 different Airbnbs across 3 different states. No roots, no friends, just Nicholas and the ghost he used to keep her in line. But here's the twist. Nicholas wasn't running toward a new life with Mindi. He was running away from the wreckage of his old one. Nicholas was previously married to Heather Thomas. During his testimony, he painted a picture of a fractured union with her. They had planned on having children, but when a medical condition made that path difficult for Heather, the friction didn't just create a rift, it ignited a resentment in Nicholas that he couldn't suppress.
When we had started dating, Heather had stated that she wanted children and that it would be relatively easy for her to have children, that she had a something called PCOS, that there were medications she could take that would make it very easy down the line for her to have children. We discussed it many times. At one point we both got tested to see if everything was in working order, but she chose not to take the medication and and therefore we never had children.
To a man who viewed himself as a high-achieving JAG officer, a biological hurdle was a breach of the ideal life he had scripted for himself. They finalized their divorce in 2015, and the judgment was staggering. During his divorce hearings, Nicholas had boasted of a net worth of $32 million, a grandiose claim that backfired when the judge ordered him to pay his ex-wife $1.5 million. After years of evading that debt, he pivotally claimed that Mindi held a stake in his phantom fortune. As the saying goes, it takes 100 lies to cover a single one. He lied so habitually that even when he accused Heather of infidelity, his words carried no weight. But for a man living in a parallel reality, his lies were his only truth. Kassotis also owed Cameron Nelson, a former Navy colleague, approximately $198,000 in credit card charges along with a $2,000 cash loan. And he had no intention of repaying. Nicholas was a man drowning in debt, with creditors closing in. The McIntyre ghost wasn't just to scare her, it was an excuse to stay off the grid. He didn't just isolate Mindi to control her, he isolated her to hide himself. He used her life, her voice, and her reputation to mask a man who was effectively a ghost. By mid-2022, the walls were closing in, but Nicholas believed he finally had a reason to keep building his house of cards. Mindi had told her friends, and likely Nicholas, that she was pregnant.
She's very excited and very happy.
You see, Nicholas was desperate to have children with Mindi, as it was the case with his first wife.
He was desperate to become a father.
For a man obsessed with legacy and control, this was the ultimate prize. But investigators believe this prize quickly became a death warrant. The prosecution's theory is chilling. They believe Nicholas discovered the pregnancy wasn't real. To a narcissist, this wasn't a medical heartbreak, it was a breach of contract, a deception he couldn't litigate. So he decided to annul it himself. Meanwhile, to keep Mindi from questioning why a successful lawyer was living like a nomad, he dialed up the McIntyre threat. He told her the pursuers were closer than ever, that their only hope was to disappear into the deep south. He chose Georgia, not for a new start, but for its isolation. He needed a stage for the final act of his deletion plan. Nicholas knew that as long as Mindi existed, he remained tethered to the world hunting him. To truly be free from his debts, his past, and his divorce, he had to delete Mindi Kassotis. Oh, and Nick Kassotis forever. Not long after, they found themselves living in Savannah, Georgia. The stage was set for the final act of his deletion plan. While Mindi was being moved through Airbnbs like a prisoner, Nicholas was already auditioning her replacement. He had started seeing another woman, Samantha Kolesnik, a horror fiction author. But it was a relationship founded on lies. To her, Nicholas was the perfect tragic hero, a widower who had lost his wife to a terrible illness. The chilling part, Nicholas was telling this woman he was a widower weeks before he ever drove that Ford Explorer to the Georgia swamp. He was speaking Mindi's death to existence. He wasn't just lying about his past anymore, he was foretelling his future. He was preparing the world for a tragedy he hadn't even committed. Nicholas didn't act out of passion, he acted with the precision of a man filling a brief. He drove to a Home Depot nearby on August 16, 2022. He didn't buy a weapon, he bought tools. He purchased Clorox wipes, latex gloves, and folding razors. On the 4th of November 2022, he bought a shovel and a hammer. Then, on the 28th of November 2022, he bought a 7-piece deer processing kit from Bass Pro Shops. Finally, on the 29th of November 2022, he purchased a Milwaukee knife. Entomological evidence estimated Mindi's death occurred between 27 November and 29 November 2022, placing the purchase of the deer processing kit right in the middle of that window. We wouldn't dwell on the horror of that night, but understand this. Nicholas used his military training and his legal coldness to ensure that when he was done, there was nothing left for the world to recognize. He didn't just kill her, he tried to unmake her. After he was done, he drove 40 miles southwest of Savannah and scattered Mindy's dismembered remains over a radius of approximately 3 miles across 2 rural counties in Georgia, Liberty and McIntosh counties. He cleaned his SUV and went back to the widower script he had been rehearsing for weeks. The SUV would later burn to the ground under sketchy circumstances. The deletion was complete, or so he thought. But Nicholas knew that even with Mindi gone, the name Kassotis carried too much weight, too much debt, and too many memories. So he did what he did best. He drafted a new reality. Mindy's family received a message from his alleged employer, a car crash, a tragedy.
I believe it was several weeks later we were told that unfortunately he had died. We were already grieving for Mindi, and then we were grieving for him. So.
It was a lie sent by his own hands, but he was getting sloppy. He told Mindy's friends and family she died at a military-based hospital after suffering a stroke. Shortly after, he was dead in a car crash. 1 man, 2 deaths, and a trail of contradictions that was starting to scream. But Nicholas took a bold step to cover his tracks. He changed his name. He became Nicholas Killian James Stark and got a photoshopped Georgia state driver's license to reflect his new name. But Nicholas forgot one thing. You can change your name on a piece of paper, but you cannot change the DNA in the Georgia swamp. A few days after he dumped her body in that swamp, local hunters stumbled upon what Nicholas thought he had successfully erased. They found Mindy's torso on December 2, 2022. Then, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation moved in and found Mindy's head and legs in the days following. Other key discoveries include a black 25-gallon Husky storage tote, a gray tote, a Milwaukee knife similar to the one Nick earlier purchased. Finally, more than a dozen Clorox wipes were found scattered around the area. But investigators were met with a wall of silence. She was a Jane Doe in a town where no one knew her name. The GBI went public. They posted 2 sketches from a forensic artist along with other details on their website, broadcast her story on local news, and waited, but the phone stayed silent.
Investigators hope that this most recent sketch of the unidentified woman will help bring some light to the case.
Nicholas's plan to isolate her had worked. Almost. When traditional leads failed, the GBI called in the FBI. They didn't just look for her name, they looked for her blood. Using advanced genealogy databases, they began cross-checking Jane Doe's DNA against millions of profiles, stitching her back into a family tree he tried to chop down. Meanwhile, Nick had moved on. He married Samantha Kolesnik in April 2023, only 5 months after Mindy's death. The same woman he had been talking to while Mindi was still alive. She believed she was marrying a successful, self-made man. She didn't realize she was stepping into a role that had already been violently vacated. Meanwhile, the man who thought he was the smartest guy in the room had forgotten that the people he cheated were the ones likely to be watching. Nick's first wife, Heather Thomas, saw the GBI sketch and contacted authorities, saying that looks like Mindi. The GBI then proceeded to meet Mindy's mom, took her swab, and cross-checked with Mindy's. At that point, the authorities were beginning to close in on Nicholas Kassotis' web of lies, and the same ex-wife, who was still owed $1.5 million, was instrumental. On May 11, 2023, Mindi Kassotis' remains were positively identified. It led them 500 miles away from that Georgia swamp, straight into the life Nicholas Kassotis had tried to burn to the ground. The digital shroud Nicholas Kassotis had spent years building had finally collapsed. 1 day later, on May 12, 2023, he was arrested in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, just 1 month after remarrying. Inside the interrogation room, Nicholas Kassotis didn't act like a grieving husband, he acted like a lawyer. He was calm, he was confident, and he had a story ready. And when the interrogator exposed the discrepancies in his story, he tried to bring the ghost to life. He claimed Jim McIntyre, the man he'd used to hunt Mindi for years, told him to tell those lies.
They lied to many people in your life, and it's continued those lies. That's not going to continue to go. You understand that, right? The big question is why.
So anything I ever lied about, I was told to lie about.
So Just right now, if you said you killed her, you'd say it because I was told a lie.
Sir, I never killed her.
So Jim told you to say that, you would say that?
No, sir.
Okay. So my point is, everything you do, if Jim told you to jump off a cliff, you were going to jump off a cliff?
Yes, sir. For years. For years, we did exactly what you told us.
So
he wanted full access to our lives. He said he was keeping us safe.
Nicholas wasn't a killer, he was a victim of a deep state conspiracy. But the GBI didn't care about ghosts. They had the receipts.
I think Jim has lied to me for a long time. I do believe that.
I don't believe Jim exists.
Sir, Jim absolutely exists. I don't know if that's his real name, but he absolutely exists.
They presented the footage from the hardware store. Nicholas in high definition selecting the very tools used to unmake his wife. The same tools dumped near the disposed remains. Cell phone analysis and vehicle tracking placed them in the vicinity of the hunting club around the time the remains were believed to have been placed there, with stops matching the exact locations where the remains were found.
The day of the 29th, when your cell phone records you going where your wife's body's found, or torso's found, and where the pieces of her body are found at other locations, and how that tracking in that area shows you being there.
And then the final nail. A water pumping station near the swamp had captured a single vehicle on the day the body was dumped, his Ford Explorer. There was no FBI agent, no McIntyre, just Nicholas and the trunk he hoped would stay closed forever.
How the cameras show you being there, and you're saying, oh no, I wasn't there. Is that what you're saying?
For the first time in his life, the lawyer couldn't argue his way out. He choked on his own lies. Yet, even as the walls of reality crushed his McIntyre fantasy, he maintained he was innocent. When detectives dropped the results of the autopsy, proving Mindi was not and had never been pregnant, Nicholas didn't react with the shock of a grieving father. He pivoted. He played the part of an uninformed husband.
She wasn't pregnant.
Yes, Sir, she was due in January.
Well, she was not pregnant. She was not pregnant.
No, she was pregnant.
Even the times that y'all were saying that she was pregnant, she was not pregnant. She was not pregnant at the time of her death.
So she was.
She was not. That's a medical certainty. She was not pregnant.
Stone-faced and clinical, it was a classic legal maneuver. If you don't admit you knew the truth, they can't prove it's your motive. Nicholas entered the courtroom believing his legal mind was still his greatest weapon. He thought he could argue his way back into the light, but the state of Georgia had built a wall of evidence he couldn't climb. The indictment didn't just charge him with a crime, it mapped out his betrayal in 12 clinical counts. Counts of malice murder, felony murder, aggravated assault, but it was the specific details. Count 11, the removal of body parts, and Count 12, tampering with evidence that laid bare the true depravity of his deletion plan. Nicholas believed his brilliance lived in the gaps between people. He thought if he isolated them, they could never compare notes. He was wrong. The same women he thought he had outsmarted became the very bridge the prosecution used to cross into the truth. On the stand, the lawyer's logic finally failed him. He claimed Mindi died suddenly, but he was prevented from seeing her body for safety reasons. He spun a tale of a mysterious Savannah hospital, a facility he couldn't name, in a location he couldn't recall.
Who told you that she had died?
A man at a medical clinic of some sort that I went to.
Where was the medical clinic you went to?
I believe somewhere in Savannah or the greater Savannah area. I don't know Savannah very well, so.
But while he was busy playing the grieving widower, the jury was looking at a man who hadn't reported his wife missing. Because you don't report someone missing when you know exactly where you left them.
Some random individual shows up at your house, says he's with the FBI and claims to be a man named Jim McIntyre. What did you do to verify that information?
I didn't verify it. Mindi believed that she had seen a badge, or she told me at the time that she'd seen a badge. I had no reason to doubt that he was who he said he was. It didn't cross my mind that somebody else could have shown up at my house at that time.
The jury didn't buy the FBI ghost or nameless hospital. They saw the $1.5 million debt. They saw the hunting knives. They didn't see a man who had lost a child. They saw a man who had lost his last thread of control and decided that if he couldn't have the life he wanted, Mindi wouldn't have a life at all.
There's the abdominal wounds. This goes back to Mindy not being pregnant. And you're mad! She told you she was pregnant.
On August 14, 2025, they found him guilty on every single charge and sentenced him to life without parole, plus an additional 25 years.
Mr. Kassotis, a jury of 12 citizens in Liberty County, Georgia, has now determined beyond a reasonable doubt that you are guilty of the offense of murder, along with 11 other counts. This case has revealed a level of depravity that truly shocks the conscience. You wrote fiction, and your life was a fiction, at least the last 6 or 7 years. The totality of the sentence being a sentence of life without parole plus 20 years to serve.
The lawyer who tried to rewrite his name, his history, and his wife's very existence was finally given a title he couldn't change: inmate. Nicholas Kassotis spent years trying to turn Mindi into a ghost. He changed his name, he faked his death, and he hoped the Georgia swamp would do the rest. But you cannot erase a woman who spent her life empowering others. You cannot delete a voice that lives in the hearts of a community 500 miles away. In the end, it wasn't his legal mind that won. It was Mindi's memory and the truth that refused to stay buried.
Almost 6 months to figure out who she was. That pumping station, I submit to you, solved a murder.
Nicholas Kassotis is exactly where he belongs, life in prison. And Mindi is finally home. If you believe every story deserves to be seen, subscribe to Base 3D. I'll see you in the next one.